Good afternoon to everyone and welcome to today's virtual design review panel meeting. This is the second item on today's agenda. I'm Joe Bordeloni, host of this meeting, but panel member David Calusio will be the chair. In addition to the panel members, we have the applicant team, city staff, members of the public, and media observing this meeting. Members of the public are welcome to observe the meeting only. The session is being recorded and will be uploaded to the DRP webpage. Just a reminder to please keep your microphones muted if you are not speaking. Thank you. And David, please begin the meeting.
Hey, good afternoon and welcome everyone. Joe, can you please confirm that this session is being recorded?
It is.
And are there any changes to the agenda today?
No, there are not.
And are there any panelists that have a conflict of interest? I assume by silence that there isn't. The second item on the agenda today is the review of 433 King Street East. The lead planner on the file is Elena Baldessera. Good afternoon, Elena. We're ready for your presentation. Please keep the presentation to under 10 minutes.
Okay, just give me, I'll just put the present. Okay, can everybody see my presentation?
I think so.
Okay. Just, perfect. So good afternoon, everybody. My name's Elena, and I'll be presenting the application before you for 433 King Street East. So the proposal today is to demolish the existing building on site and construct a 6-story residential building with 20 units, 15 bicycle parking spaces. 10 of those will be long-term spaces and 5 of those are short-term bicycle spaces, and 5 vehicle parking spaces, including 1 barrier-free parking space. So the site is at 433 King Street East. It's located on the north side of King Street between Victoria Avenue North and East Avenue North. It has the yellow star on the aerial. This is a view of the site from the south side of King Street. So it is that red 2.5-story brick building. This is an image of the laneway that is at the rear of the subject lands, and this would be looking from Victoria Avenue North. So some context photos. This is the south side of King Street. There is a church as well as a site plan application for a school next door. This is looking west on King Street East from the subject lands. And again, this is looking east along King Street East. So this is what the intersection looks like at King Street East and Victoria Avenue North. And this would be looking towards west towards King Street. So this is a concept plan and the ground floor plan. As you can see, the ground floor includes amenity area, a lobby, and garbage, and the 5 vehicle parking spaces are located at the rear of the property, which would use the laneway for access. So this is the north elevation of the proposed development. This is the east elevation of the proposed development. This is the south elevation of the proposed development. And then this is the west elevation of the proposed development. So this is just a rendering showing what it would look like from King Street East. To now go over some of the policy that applies to the property, the subject lands, which are shown with a yellow star, are identified as primary corridor in our official plan. And the designation itself is actually mixed use medium density. Again, it's shown with the star on the map. So a general overview of the current policy for our primary corridors and our mixed-use medium density areas. So an overview of the policies you see on the screen is that in these areas, we really want to encourage more density along the corridor, including mixed-use buildings where there's an opportunity to do so. We want it to evolve over time to be compact and have people be able to live, work, and shop in this area. And we also want to allow for a pedestrian-oriented development. So some more urban design policies. We want to respect the existing character development patterns, built form, and landscapes that are in the area, as well as complement them. Be consistent with that surrounding area. Contribute to the character of the community with appropriate design and streetscape amenities. And complement the existing massing patterns, so things like character, color, all of those considerations. So the subject lands are currently zoned transit-oriented corridor, medium density, mixed-use development, and it's shown with a yellow star on the subject lands. So currently the property allows for a multiple dwelling to be constructed, which is the proposal before you. The minimum building height needs to be 11 meters with a maximum building height of 22 meters is permitted. So what we're looking for today in terms of our discussion is, does the proposal represent compatible integration with the surrounding area in terms of the use, scale, form, and character? Does the proposal complement and animate existing surroundings through building design and placement, as well as pedestrian amenities? And is the proposal massed to respect existing and planned street proportions? So that's the presentation I have for you today. If you have any questions.
Thank you, Elena. I think we'll turn it over to the consultant to provide additional information. Please keep your presentation to under 10 minutes as well.
Hello, everyone. Thank you, David. Thank you, Eliana. Share my screen. Can everyone see my screen? Hello?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Can everyone see my screen? Okay. Hi, everyone. My name is Jazz. I'm an urban designer with GSP Group. I'm here with a few of the members of the project team, along with the owner. We have Shem from KNYMH Inc. He's the project architect. We have Sarah Knoll from GSP, the urban planner, and the owner, Diana Benitez from Dijon Development. We here also have Chelsea Tyers, a cultural heritage specialist from WSP, who prepared the documentation and salvage report and is available to respond to any of the clarification questions of the panel. So to begin with the site location, the site is located along the north side of King Street East, closely abutting the eastern boundary of downtown Hamilton along Victoria Avenue North. The site has a frontage of 12.19 meters along King Street and a depth of 39.25 meters. And moving on, I'll hand over to Diana to give you a quick development overview.
Hi, sorry, passing on to me, Chaz?
Yes, yes.
Okay, just very briefly, high level. Currently, when we acquired the building, it is vacant and was gutted and had some significant water damage because it's just been vacant for so long and in disrepair. Around September 2021, the property was broken into and it was caught on fire. And we do know from the investigation, we went to investigation because it was suspicious that it started from a mattress in the building. So it completely charred the building. We'd recently gone through insurance and had received full replacement value because of the extensive damage. So it is even more so derelict than it was when we had acquired it. So, our proposal is to build a 20-unit purpose-built rental units that we want to provide to the city. With the area of the LRT, the school coming across the street, we really do want to gentrify the area and kind of, keep up with what's going on and trying to make that area much more appeasing and also provide rental units to the city. I just do know very recently there's a CMHC report that was released February 2020. And 2021 saw the highest amount of supply of rental units in the city of 900 units, yet it didn't keep up with the demand of vacancy, which went even lower at 2.8%. So there definitely is a need for housing in the city of Hamilton, especially with immigration increases as well by the government. Thank you.
Thanks, Diana. I'm just going to talk about the planning context and zoning compliance a little bit more from what Elena provided you. So the site is designated mixed use medium density and is within the primary corridor of the Urban Hamilton official plan. These designations encourage a compact urban form, 6-story building height, and development that supports transit and active transportation. The policies do allow for a standalone residential building. The site is located in the Talk 1 zone and complies with all of the land use permissions, including amenity area, except the minimum parking requirement and a very tiny pinch point to the drive aisle width. Residential intensification on the subject site is supportive of policy directions articulated in both provincial and local policy frameworks, which promote intensification on sites well served by municipal infrastructure and along urban boundary corridors, which have or are planned to have higher order transit service. To this effect, the development proposal will intensify the site, which is in close proximity to the future Wellington and Wentworth Station MTSAs, adding to the city's housing stock, diversifying housing, bringing more residential and residents and vitality into the urban corridor, supporting existing and planned transit infrastructure, including the King Street LRT and the Sobe bicycle sharing service. We understand that the required process is to submit and obtain the site plan approval, which will require a successful minor variance application relating to the parking as mentioned. Our site plan application to the city is imminent, and we understand that the DRP's comments will inform the city's urban design review. Jazz.
Thank you, Sarah. Moving on. So active and public transportation. The site is well served by existing and planned public transit and has a great walkability, transit, and bike score. The site is within walking distance of future LRT stations, multiple Sobe bike share locations, and Hamilton bus stops and car share locations. Moving on to the neighborhood context. The site is located in the Lansdale neighborhood, which is comprised of a variety of residential, commercial, retail, institutional, cultural, and educational uses in a variety of build forms, height, and ages. The immediate neighborhood context is comprised of retail commercial uses along King Street, mid to high-rise buildings ranging from 6 to 25-story apartment buildings, and low-rise residential, primarily along the northeast side. Multiple development applications are starting to pop up in this area, including 2 6-story apartment buildings east of the site and a 3-story St. Patrick's Elementary School and Community Center just south of the site. The site has a walking access to 3 neighborhood parks, retail and commercial corridor along King Street, transit stops, schools, hospitals, and place of worship. So moving on to design evolution, the design of the site has evolved over the past year, and setbacks and stepbacks were added to the as-of-right massing to create a defined base and to meet the angular plane from King Street and the rear of the property. Next, the first three-story facade was aligned to the street to create a consistent street wall. The ground floor then was recessed to provide space for urban landscaping, short-term bike parking, a recessed entrance, and weather protection. Finally, the window of the ground floor amenity area was adjusted to increase the glazing size, to increase permeability, and reflecting an active street frontage along the King Street. So some of the urban design considerations. So built form, the proposed development is an appropriate expression of the mid-rise building form that is compatible with the surrounding built form context and creates a consistent street wall, pedestrian-friendly enclosure along the street, and is generally in keeping with the urban design principles of the official plan. Building base, the ground floor is designed to have a legible and barrier-free at-grade entrance, a program amenity area conveniently located bike parking, and along with windows and doors opening onto the street to provide eyes on the street, and animating and visually connecting the public and private realm. For building facade, the building facade incorporates step backs and balconies on the top floors to differentiate it from the base. The proposal includes a side facade wall art, knowing that as the street will evolve in future with future redevelopments, the side walls may get covered and shared with neighboring developments. The wall art shown here is just for illustration purposes and showing just how the wall could look like. To the building materials. So the proposed building materials are compatible with the surrounding context and help create a facade that is consistent but yet unique. Parking and loading areas are integrated into the rear of the building, accessed by an alleyway and screened from public view. There's also a step back on the rear of the property line to meet with the angular plane. So moving on to corridor design guidelines. So as a regard to the corridor design guidelines, the mechanical penthouse is set back and screened from public view, and the building meets the angular plane from King Street and the rear of the property line. In general, in our opinion, the proposed development represents a built form that is compatible and respects the existing and planned context, creates a direct relationship with the public realm, promotes active transportation, and addresses the relevant urban design guidelines, and thus represents a good design. Thank you. That concludes our presentation. We're happy to respond panels any clarification questions. I also have floor plans and elevations in this presentation if you want to discuss on that. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll turn it over to the panelists for questions. I don't know if Dana's been able to join us, but if she hasn't, the first panelist would be Ted. Questions?
Hello, thank you for your presentation. Can you tell us a bit about materiality? And we're seeing reference to precast panels for gray block and brick. And can you elaborate on those materials and also on the materiality of the cornices and the other detailing we're seeing in this front facade, as well as the penthouse enclosure?
Yes. I think Shyam may be better to answer that question, but I'll briefly explain. The materials like the red brick is contextual of that area, and the concrete bands over the window and the cornices are also similar, like found in this neighborhood. And the continuation of the cornices and on top of the third floor and the ground floor are to like maintain the consistent street wall. And then Shyam, maybe you could further elaborate.
Yeah, thank you, Josh. Yeah, so we're looking at essentially at this point we're discussing using precast panels where we could and precast elements, just for this fact that we are in a very tight construction site. So having scaffoldings and dealing with protection and not, it's going to be very difficult. So that we figured that the quicker we can clad the building, essentially the less of a burdensome construction mess it's going to be for the rest of the neighborhood. So we are looking again at our precast because of durability and the quickness of and how quickly we construct. Also, the precast does have still quite a bit of flexibility in terms of matching material and color to the neighboring buildings, like you see the one on the right. The material in the levels, let's say 4 and up, are looking at using essentially window wall. Again, just to provide a very light and there you go. Thank you. Very light material that's easily able to be constructed from the outside without, again, creating more of a burdensome streetscape during construction. The penthouse screening, participating in open penthouse with screening, which maybe consists of perhaps a metal galvalume system or a metal siding system, essentially, that would essentially just be similar to the color that you see, a gray color that kind of blends into the sky, but allows for us to have flexibility when we are doing the mechanical systems on the roof, that we can have some taller units without creating another floor essentially on top of what we have right now, as you can see.
Right. Thank you. Was retail or commercial considered for that at-grade use?
I think because it was such a tight site and the amenity requirements and parking requirements that we needed that space for amenity, and so we did put the active amenity along the frontage. I don't know, Diana, if you wanted to speak anything further about commercial.
Yeah, and I think because trying to meet the amenity requirement and to provide as much housing units as possible was the reason why we kind of didn't do the retail and focused on providing as much housing, but still meeting the requirements.
Thank you. Has the rooftop been considered as an amenity space for the residents?
So we do have access to the rooftop. However, if we do end up having an amenity space, we are now into a different building classification by the OBC, and that would create a very the feasibility of a rental becomes much harder at that point. So we don't want to compromise the intent of this being a rental that is going to be suitable for the market as it is. Again, providing that amenity space on top will become a 7-story building at that point based on the building code. So we'd like to not have to go down that route if we can avoid that. Again, Dan, if you have something you want to add to, again, the affordability aspect of it, and obviously this is one of those pieces of the puzzle.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, like I remember we contemplated at Shamrock, but it became the risk in the fire code as well, and it being a rental building. Again, why it wasn't factored in, but we did think about that.
All right, thank you. And final question, were balconies or French balconies considered on the north facade, the lower massing, or even the street frontage to allow residents to have, access to the outdoors to some extent?
We were, again, this is going back to the aspect of the rental. I mean, the amount of glazing we provided for those rooms is quite sufficient. Not to say that we cannot look at, again, having Juliet's at the back of the building or even towards the streetscape. I think at this point that would be, again, another layer of detailed discussion we can have with Diana and see where she wants to go with this.
Yeah, I think one of the reasons too is just it starts to then make the units much smaller. So as we get to the top there, we're getting down to bachelors as well. And just from our experience with rental buildings we do have, I mean, you are getting, more people would like at least one bedroom or a den, especially now people having the option to work from home. It is nice to have a space for an office, but that is one of the things we want to do with the amenity. We're thinking like with the amenity area, we could do kind of a work life and add office space there. So the tenants have smaller units can go and use the amenity space as well as an office area.
Okay, thank you very much.
Jana?
Oh, thank you. I was just wondering, Ted stole all my questions, so, but I just was wondering if you could elaborate on or clarify when you talked about the amenity of the rooftop not working. It seemed like it was like an indoor amenity, but did you consider at least an outdoor rooftop terrace for those units which don't have balconies, or actually for all of the residents to have some outdoor amenity space?
Well, the moment we put occupancy on that roof, it changes the building classification. So that's really the driving factor in not having the amenity space accessible to the public. The units that we could essentially provide the step backs for given larger balconies, we certainly did. But again, we're just trying to be conscious of again construction costs and this being a rental, that we're trying to keep that affordability aspect really in mind as we're actually going through this.
Oh, okay, thank you.
Jennifer Mallard?
Thanks, David. A couple questions. First, could you go back to your angular plane section? Okay, I just wanted to see if those balconies were within that angular plane, because that'll follow up with the comment I have later. My second question is regarding the salvaged brick. And I know it's preliminary, but do you have plans to use it? And if so, where?
Yes, so the the salvage brick, we are planning to use it within the interiors of the building. And Shem, maybe you want to.
That's right. Yes, because again, not knowing really the state of that brick completely and whether how reliable it is, I'm worried to provide it, use it as a building cladding or part of the envelope in case there's future water ingress, for example. We prefer to use it on the inside of the building as accents or features throughout, whether it's the amenity spaces, the corridors, for example. I think that would be the better use of it. That's what people could experience of, that reclaimed material versus having it somewhere that's 3 stories up, or no one really will ever appreciate the fact that it was reclaimed, for example.
Okay, thank you.
Jennifer Sison.
Thanks, David. So I wanted to flag something. Sorry, I missed in my review that WSP completed the Cultural Heritage Report. So that's my firm. I won't be commenting on that, but I did want to flag it in case it's still a perceived conflict of interest. I can recuse myself and leave for the rest of the meeting if anybody has any concerns with that.
I'd look to the city to comment on that. No, Joe or somebody else can comment if that's seen as a conflict that would stop Jennifer from commenting on that.
Ken, do you want to touch on that?
Probably better to be safe than sorry in this case. Jen, so yeah, probably not worth commenting at this point.
All right, I'll see you at the next meeting.
Thanks.
Bye.
Okay, Eldon?
Just 2 questions of clarification. One of the slides showed, I think, the north elevation. And yeah, and I was just wondering if you could clarify what the materiality is for that. And you may have mentioned it. I'm sorry, I just turned my camera here. I just realized it was off. You may have mentioned it. I didn't catch it. What is the thought as it relates to that materiality?
So the gray material would still, again, we're looking at using a precast system. So it would be a panelized precast panel with the bunch of windows in them. And then as you go up to the very top story, the 6th story, that's essentially a window wall system.
Okay. And then my other question was, it was in relation to actually something early in the presentation. The proposal was presented as being an opportunity for gentrification of this area. And I just want to make sure, is that the outcome, to gentrify this community as part of this development?
You're on mute, Anna.
Yep, the classic I'm on mute. Not gentrification. I mean, it's just, I mean, I don't know if you've been to that area.
I have.
Yeah, and it's just with the school and the LRT coming and the future of what was presented earlier, that this be a live, work, shop, pedestrian area. It just seems in keeping with what the intent seems to be in the area. Maybe I didn't use the proper word, but yeah.
Understood. You're thinking about revitalization.
Yes,
of the area.
that was the word. I actually had that word. I have that word written. Sorry, it was just a mix of words. And then, I mean, the added risk, like, I think because it was vacant and we did add fencing and whatnot, it had attracted, I guess, the break-in or what, a place for people they're trying, like, the city and transient people are looking for a place, but unfortunately the huge risk of what happened, knowing that it started from a mattress, like that was never, this building was vacant. There was nothing in there. So.
No, thank you for clarifying. I appreciate that.
You.
Those are my questions. Thanks, David.
Joey.
Thanks, David. So I do not work for WSP, and my questions will be focused on the documentation and salvage report. I'm curious as to there's a Rockmar engineering report that's referenced. What were its conclusions?
So it didn't say it's, so that was really a report to help the insurance company in assessing sort of the work that needed to be done. It didn't say like it needs to be demolished. I know initially like we had to do, they did some shoring reinforcement so that the building's not going to fall apart. Like that had to be done immediately, and we did have an order from the city to do that. So that was like, that was the immediate thing, was get the structural engineer in there and the report done, and then do any work that needed to be done. So the recommendation there, like for safety, was shoring.
Okay, so it was an immediate. Okay, so it was to immediately stabilize the building.
Yeah.
Just in case. Was there any further structural recommendations? I'm asking only because in the report it also mentioned that there's no opportunity to salvage anything on the interior, but I'm wondering if there's opportunity to salvage some of the old lumber or joists.
I'll have to check, but in the pictures that were provided, like they'd shown that in the report, it was all charred.
Okay.
So,
okay.
And then I just do know that we like from the, I mean, like, we got full replacement value in the end.
What do you mean? Oh, for the insurance company?
For the insurance, yeah. Like it
okay.
was based on
okay,
the
okay, great. And in the report, it does note that it's recommended to salvage the brick, foundation stones, stone sills, and keystones. What percentage of, well, not necessarily the stone sills and keystones, because there's not many, but what percentage of salvage would there be for the brick and the foundation stone?
Chelsea, would you have a rough percentage on that?
I can't say, because, and maybe Shem, you can say more based on how you know you're going to reuse it in the interior, because I suspect you'll have to, when the building is demolished and salvaged, you'll have to see how much brick is actually in good enough condition to include in the interior, and I suspect some of it may be included interior and some of it may have to be donated to a salvage yard or something like that. But I can't speak to the percentage.
Okay, so well, if it's a mix of both for the project and other uses, are you considering salvaging 100%?
I think at this time we'd really have to kind of dive more into, I would say, the guts of the building, because again, I don't think the intent is to use it on the outside just because it's of how
I understand that. I'm not asking the quantity to be used for the project. I'm just trying to get an understanding of what percentage will be salvaged of the existing building. I'll get into that other stuff later.
I would assume based on the recommendation as much as can be. So once they're in doing the demolition and they evaluate it, they'll determine if it's retainable for the development or to donate.
Okay. Thanks, Sarah. That's all.
I do want to know, like, so the building before the fire, like it was just studs up, like there was no drywall. So that's another reason to assess the brick, because I never went in the building after the fire because of the safety, but I don't know as well if that, the brick got exposed obviously because there was just studs up, no drywall.
Yeah. Okay.
Lloyd, do you have any other questions?
No, I don't. Thank you.
I have two questions. I just want confirmation on this elevation that I'm looking at. Is everything I'm looking at precast? Is that, other than the glass and the window frames?
That would be the intent. Yes. The one element of the cornices may become an eave system. If we can get them done with the precast system as a system in its entirety, that would be preferable, obviously. But that is the intent right now, is that we're looking at as a precast system.
And similarly, the sort of red brick side party walls are actually precast, and so.
That's correct. And again, this is more to do with construction staging and construction management. Just again, it's a tight site. We're bookended on both ends, getting access.
Okay, clarification on the materials is sufficient. Yeah. Okay. The other question, I guess, is, do you have any sustainability ambitions with the project that in terms of targets and whatnot?
So the project is located in close proximity to the the future planned LRT station and It's in the.
I meant like LEED standard or
like that. Okay.
Certification of some level, or.
That is something I'd totally be open to exploring as well. We haven't delved fully into that, but it's definitely, yeah, especially since one option too is with the new CMHC Select program and meeting points of affordability, sustainability, and accessibility. That's another stream we're looking into and seeing how we can kind of get the points that they require in all those 3 levels.
Okay, that's all the questions that I have. Hidden my question in terms of who's speaking here. I think Ted is the first one for panel commentary and advice.
Great, thank you. So would like to start by just, thanking you and congratulating you. I think this is the scale is appropriate. This type of development is very appropriate for this neighborhood, and generally appreciate the approach to revitalization that Diana, you and your group seem to be committed to, which I think is really important for the rejuvenation, regeneration of our cities. So, generally support this approach. The density, the massing, et cetera, I think all seems to make sense for this site and for the future of this corridor. And appreciate the increase in rental units and the commitment to that as a necessity for livable cities. I think, and I also I appreciate the use of the continued use of materials from the front facades and the rear facades onto the side facades. I think those are often considered to be, not important facades, but they often are visible for decades before the infill comes along. So appreciate that has a qualitative aspect to it. Having said that, the materiality of this building and the craft is really going to make the benefits of it from an urban design perspective. I think it comes down to the craft and the details of the design. And I think there's a bit of an awkwardness between the relationship of the lower level and the upper level. To start with the west facade, there's a kind of gray block that denotes the west elevation of the lower block. Perhaps that should just be the red brick, so it feels more continuous, and this lower massing does not feel like it's been added on to a massing in behind. It would feel more of a holistic approach to the design approach. And I do think there's a question of the historicism, and I heard the term EFIS. If there's an intention to use EFIS for those cornices, I think that would be really problematic. You're identifying or you're modeling this facade after some very nice details that were crafted and had an integrity to them. And I think in the development of the facade to King Street, that has to also have a craft to it that is authentic. So if it's precast, I think it should remain within that realm. And I think the quality of that detailing is going to be really important for the success of the building. The concrete block, the gray, I would, with precast, you can actually get quite a bit more granular in terms of the fineness of the masonry. What's being shown approximates concrete block. It looks like, cinder block and comes across as being kind of not that welcoming and could be a finer grade, a Roman brick, could be, you can play with the materiality of that a lot more to make it a much finer and more elevated material without additional costs. I think that the west elevation, the jointing and precast, there's lots that can be done to create reveals and to create lines, vertical line weights on the west elevation that could help to articulate that facade. This development does not have any outdoor amenities to speak of. It's got indoor amenities. Not all the units have balconies. I do believe that you could have balconies on the rear without impacting the size of the units, potentially. And I appreciate the comments around the code implications of making the upper roof habitable. However, given the intent to create a quality of life environment and enhance the city and the residents' experience of this building, that upper space could be really a fundamental change in how they use the building and inhabit that space with these great views to downtown, to the south, the microclimate, and could create an outdoor gathering space for the tenants. So I know that looking at the plans, the elevator and the stairs seem to go to that level. So I think it could be a very good asset for the building. Also, last comment, the sustainability that was touched on, I think this project, given its window to wall ratio, et cetera, could be a passive house building. I think you could design it to exceedingly high sustainable performance without a lot of cost if the effort and the intent were there, which would help to market this building. And there's also grants that are available to help offset some of those costs. So I strongly suggest you look into that. But thank you for your presentation.
Jana.
Thank you very much. I agree with that about the scale of the development being very appropriate. I absolutely agree on the outdoor amenity. I think with what we experienced in the last couple of years of COVID, and access to some outdoor space is really important for condos or rental units, in my opinion. And so I would really encourage you to look at either balconies, even small, or the rooftop terrace. And when building in this area and so close to historic buildings, I would very much suggest being slightly more modest in the architectural detailing. To me, the very strong and quite massive cornice treatment doesn't really complement the, for example, the elaborate treatment on the adjacent building, the brick treatment in that area. And I think that would be very overpowering. I would suggest to keep it more simple. I wasn't sure if the building is projecting a bit or if it's a recessed a little bit. It wasn't clear because there are two different renderings which show it differently. I wasn't sure. So I would suggest at least a small recess to give the adjacent building a better presence and not overpower it. And I agree that the upper 3 stories read really, well, to me, they read really strange. And the material is shown as spandrel. To me, that is way too much spandrel panel, and it's really strange looking, in my opinion. I would simplify this form and even eliminate those 2 projecting areas on the, or 1, sorry, but for 2 units on the 4th floor. Or even use the form which was shown in the section 6 design evaluation. I think that was a little better form than what you are showing in the renderings and the final floor plans. And just a last comment, I understand that the hot air balloons are likely just a temporary solution and probably just an illustration of your thoughts about some future treatment of these facades. But hopefully you'll come up with something more interesting in the final design.
Actually, I looked at I googled like Hamilton street art, and there's a whole site which has all the art in Hamilton. So I did reach out actually to 2 artists asking if if there's something they'd like to do that did murals in the city already. Like one guy's name was Alexander Bacon, and then there's Lester and Norman Coloma, and Lester does art based on the history of the building. So like it was a physician's office, like you have nurses or doctors or something on the side, and so we looked into that.
I love personally hot air balloons. It just doesn't it will be an artwork, right? So that's fine.
Okay, yeah.
That's all I wanted to say. But thank you very much. Thanks.
Jennifer Mallard.
Thank you, and thank you for your presentation. I agree with comments that have gone before, congratulating you for the scale and the approach to this building, particularly because it's rental. We see a lot of condos, and we know that there's not enough rental accommodation in our city. So this is great to see. We've talked a bit about the historicism of the base, and I echo, I think it was Ted's comment about if that cornice ends up to be EFIS, I think that's not going to achieve the statement of quality that is needed. And I would rather see a completely modern project. Nothing, we can respect the massing, the rhythm, and the context of the adjacent buildings, but in a completely modern expression. I think producing a historicism is less powerful, particularly if you're not backing it up with very traditional building methods. I'm sure Joey will have more to say about that. Talking about livable units, particularly because people are living at home, the front units, particularly up on the upper floors, are quite small. And I'm wondering if in that section diagram in the angular plane, if there's an easy way, if there's a line to strike that you can stay within the angular plane and provide just French balconies so that you're actually creating more living space for those front units. It'll be year-round living space. Balconies are only really used in the summer and off seasons. But those units are small, and given that they're rental, it would be great to provide them as slightly larger units. And on that approach, if we can also provide French balconies on the back. The back elevation looks like it looks like a alleyway elevation, and it certainly looks like a lot of the alleyway elevations from 100 years ago. But given that now that people are living downtown, I think we can do better. So I think that should be really considered as a second front facade. My last comment is about the use of window wall. We know its performance is not great. Internal comfort is not great. And if we're looking at a more sustainable building, we'd be looking at a different window to wall ratio. So I would say find a massing approach that doesn't use window wall at all. Those are my comments. Thank you.
Joey.
Thanks, David. Thanks everyone for your presentation. I agree. I think overall, I think this is a good project. I think as an urban statement, it fits in very well. I think its use is important, especially since there's such a lack of housing, especially rental housing in the city and also throughout the province. So I mean, my comments are maybe more focused on the heritage components. It's great to see, Shem, you had mentioned that because you're not sure about the structural integrity of the brick due to the fire, that potentially you wouldn't be able to use it for exterior sheathing, and that it would work better as an interior element, potentially as an accent piece. I think that's a really good idea. And hopefully, you can really celebrate that brick, whether it's in the units or in the common areas. Also, with the remainder of the brick, I know we don't have a certain percentage yet, but it would be great to see that material spread out throughout the city or through other projects. I know there are a number of heritage contractors that are always looking for this type of material. They're also looking for old lumber for reconstructed heritage windows. So there's there's a lot of potential for for this old material, especially with buildings that are. I think this one's from 1870, so 150 years old, over 150. I'm a bit surprised that, and I'm glad that I was able to review a documentation and salvage report, but I'm a bit surprised that a cultural heritage impact assessment wasn't included as part of this package, because it is an inventoried property. I understand the building's going to go away, but as part of the cultural heritage impact assessment, there's a section that talks about the commemoration of the building and the history of the building in some way. And I think it's great that you're, commemorating the material by reusing it. There needs to be, I think, additional commemoration, and that report will speak to that. So I'm going to, if it hasn't been done yet, or if it's in, if there isn't plans to do it, I would recommend to staff that it forms part of the SPA checklist. Unless someone wants to speak to that.
So Joey, initially we did go through formal consultation on this. Initially, it was requested, and then because of the fire and the documentation relating to that, it was recommended that it was just the documentation and salvage report, that a cultural heritage impact assessment was not required.
Okay, that's fine. Then I would still recommend that a commemoration plan be developed and put in place. And these aren't, huge reports, but they are something that does ensure that this building is commemorated in some way through the new project. My last piece is about, and Ted touched on, a number of my colleagues touched on it, is and I think maybe I'll focus more on the use of the proposed material and I guess in some way commemorating the heritage buildings along the block. That's a very hard thing to do for a new building, especially when you're taking on materials like EFIS and a precast block. And as my colleagues have done, I would advise against using materials that are trying to replicate historic materials. And I would really advise against it for this project because you have a beautiful historic building next door to you. And I think if you try to replicate something historic, it will actually devalue your project. So I'd recommend that, like the others, you do take a more contemporary approach. Actually, David had a very good recommendation about how to kind of deal with, the composition of the facade, and I'm going to leave that comment to him. But I think that's it for me. Thank you.
Thanks, Joey. I guess I better remember what I said.
I can remind you.
Yeah. Well, I think in general, as all of the other panelists have stated, I think there's support for the project, the massing strategy, the general nature of the project that you're proposing is commendable. I think it is really an issue of refinement that we're looking at, that it's not really quite there. And one question I would like, I wonder if somebody can pull up the ground floor plan. And this is maybe me being too granular, but I do wonder in the massing how much you can step back from the heritage a little bit more. And I know from looking at the plans that it's really driven by where the stair and the elevator have to be. That's locking you into where you are. And I notice you have an exit route. It goes from the stair and sort of winds around the garbage room. And I just wonder whether it would be possible to get rid of that corridor and go straight out through the vestibule as an exit route, even if it meant flipping the parking or whatever. And that way it would allow you a little bit more flexibility in locating that, that element that really drives everything up through the plans. So if that stair band was able to move, I guess it's north, and perhaps by getting rid of that corridor and solving, you wouldn't necessarily compromise. That allows you, as you go up through the building, first of all, the southern unit is the smaller of the ones. I could even see you doing a larger footprint on the lower levels, sort of cantilever a bit more over one of the parking lots and still sticking within your section. And it would allow, I think, you to move the top building a little bit, the top floors, I guess the 4th, 5th, and 6th, a little further back from the street. Because I think at that corner there's one corner where it's very close, and I feel that the composition would be improved if you could make them a little bit separate there. I think I agree with the commentary about the challenges of in the precast medium to do something that really achieves the refinement and quality of the heritage building in a kind of imitative way. I think in this case, you should be doing something that's complementary but contemporary, and that if, and I think the comment that Joey was referring to is I was suggesting that if you look at the existing buildings to the east, I think that's the direction where the handsome existing heritage buildings are, that through an analysis of those buildings in terms of, you know, the regulating lines, the proportions, and the key, you know, the character and richness of the detailing. It's not about duplicating them, but it's maybe about, you know, using the same enthusiasm, but with a modern approach, you know, replicating a idea of a cornice, but with something that's different but contemporary. I think is maybe the way to go. And also I just think maybe a simplification of the materials strategy. You have a number of different colors, and to Ted's comment about, you know, bringing that right now it does look like you kind of stuck a little heritage thing on the front of your building in terms of that, you know, that gray zone that you can see from the west. Whether you know, you just sort of approach it as a block rather than a stick on, and it's incorporated into the rest of the building. And similarly, maybe avoid the window wall with just sticking with a more of the panelized system of precast, and working with the inherent qualities of that system, as Ted was suggesting, you know, identifying what are the module size, because when you say panels, I assume you're using large panels, not little blocks. You're talking about some kind of wall system that's you know, story high panels, at least maybe 2-story high panels, and that, you know, celebrating the joints as opposed to like right now the views look like you have a monolithic, you know, brick wall on the west and east sides, when in fact we know that it will be subdivided into precast panels that will have, you know, you'll inevitably not be able to achieve that level of continuity. So instead of, you know, pretending that you're going to be achieving something that you can't, just get into there and work with that system. I mean, an example of that is the cornice that you do have really extends beyond your property to the east and west, seems to go over your neighbor's land. I think that's a kind of an unlikely scenario. And so I think, again, you know, I think that kind of approach. And when I look at on the north facade, again, I think it could be a little bit more straightforward. I agree with the strategies that you could look to get more open space, but even the idea of having those piers at the bottom that are wrapped in, look like they're made out of brick is pretty unconvincing. I think it's, I think you could re-examine those and make them, I guess you might want to re-examine them, I guess is what I'm suggesting without telling you how to do it, but it looks they look spindly and invitation for somebody to drive into them. As a brick facade, if it was really brick, I just have this picture of, you know, knocked out bricks at bumper height and stuff like that. And so I think that there's an opportunity to look at those elements and maybe some of the elements on the front facade that might share a different character that is more contemporarily inspired. Anyway, I do think you've got a project that has a lot going for it, and as we say, some refinement, and we look forward to seeing how it turns out. And again, I do think you should take advantage of whatever sustainability opportunities that you can find in here. I think it will make a better project, and you know, obviously you're a good citizen of the community, and that would just reinforce that strategy and saleability of the rental units there. Thank you. Do you have any questions for our panel?
I don't.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, everyone. Have a good day.